Hello and welcome. I'm Karen and this is Common Bond Yoga. And today we are talking about hips. And hips, it's, as a teacher, whenever you say, hey, does anyone want to do anything in particular today? Everyone says hips. And I get it. What I realize is that for many of us, we feel like a discomfort in our hips, and we immediately assume that that means we need to stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch. And I've done that, and I have overstretched my hips. And I see a lot of people overstretching their hips. And so what it is we have to find that balance between where do I actually need to be strengthening in my hips, but then also where do I need to be stretching? And we're all different. So I don't want you to think that what I'm saying is exactly the way it's going to be for everybody. It's not. But I do believe that probably all of us do need to do a little bit more strengthening and a little bit more stretching in our hips. So we're going to do that today. Okay. So I want you to have a block, at least one block, and we're going to start on our backs. And I will say where I feel like we tend to be weaker in our entire body is the back side of our body, because we just don't do as much stuff with our muscles back here. We do a lot of stuff in front of our body. So we're going to start by doing a little bit of hip stabilizing and strengthening for the glutes and the hamstrings. Okay. So I want you to lay down on your back and feet flat on the mat. Ideally, you want to have your spine in neutral, which means you're not arching your back up away from the ground, and you're also not trying to really push your low back down into the ground, right? Want the spine to be in neutral, which will actually help us to have our hips in neutral. And then something that's going to help to stabilize is to bring a block and to place it between your inner thighs. And I want you to squeeze it gently. The idea is not to clench up the body. The idea is to create strength and stability without creating tension and stress. Okay? So do whatever you do with your arms. Okay, just relax your arms. Gently hug your block in with your inner thighs. Gently pull your navel in towards your spine. So again, I'm not trying to press my low back flat into the mat. And then I'm going to start to slowly lift my hips up. And hold, and then I'm going to lower the hips down. Do that a couple more times. So push into the heels, lift the hips up. Don't lift them up super duper high, and lower down. And as I'm moving, you might even put your hands on your hips here and just kind of feel, or maybe your low back, and feel that everything is staying pretty neutral and pretty stable. I do want you to feel that your hamstrings and your glutes are waking up, but once again, try not to clench or tense up anywhere in your body. Okay, so let's do one more bridge lift up and lower down. So just kind of getting everything warmed up. Now we're going to pull the block out, but I want you to keep that muscle memory of having a block between your inner thighs. Okay, put the block off to the side. Squeeze your imaginary block and then lift your hips up. Now what I want you to do here is bring your hands in and put your hands on your hips so you can feel where your hips are in space. And I'm going to start marching. And as I'm picking up my feet, I'm going to try to do it without collapsing into the hips. Okay, I'm going to try to hold my hips really stable. And that first step is always the hardest. So just shift your weight over into your left foot and pick up your right. It doesn't have to come up very far. And then pick up your left. And then just start to march a little bit here in place. It gets a little bit easier to hold the hips steady as you keep going. Lift. Okay, so I'm going to lift up my left knee. I'm going to hold it here. I'm going to start to feel that right hamstring and glute a lot more. I'm going to lift my left leg up to the sky. And now we'll work here again on stabilizing the hips and strengthening the glutes. The glute, especially the right glute and the right hamstring. So I'm going to lower my hips, and then I'm going to push down into my right heel, and I'm going to lift my hips and push my left heel up to the sky. Lower the hips and lift the hips up. So I might keep my hands on my hips here still to make sure I'm not sinking into one side or the other. I'm holding my hips steady. I've got that imaginary block still between my legs. And then bring your left foot back down. Find that position in your legs where your feet are hip distance apart again. And now pick up your right knee. And again, the hips should be stable here. Lift your right leg up. I'm going to lower my hips down and then push into your left heel. Push up through your right heel. And remember, I'm not going up super duper far in my bridge. I'm not trying to come into a yoga bridge. I'm really working on more my lower body in this bridge pose, working on the hips, the hamstrings, the glutes. And lower and lift, and then bring your foot back down. And now slowly bring your hips down to the mat. And now we'll come up to a seated position. You can roll to your side or you can rock yourself up, however you want to get there. And let's come to the hands and the knees. And we'll take just an easy downward facing dog pose. Just stretch back, bend your knees as much as you need to. Don't try to force your heels down to the mat. And then just walk to your hands and come up to standing. Okay, so now that we're standing, I want you to grab your block. You're going to take the block, and once again, we're going to place it between the inner thighs. And the idea here is to get a feeling of hugging in and spreading out. So think about opening up through the front of your hips while you're still hugging your block. And that's going to help to stabilize my hips. It's also going to help to support the low back because those two go hand in hand pretty much. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a couple of half salutes with my block. So on your inhale, stretch your arms up. And now as I exhale, I'm going to hinge at my hips, send my hips back, and with a nice straight spine, I'll come forward. You can always use a second block in your forward fold. Now, I'm still hugging my block. Lift halfway and fold. And then push down into your feet. Squeeze your block. Draw your navel back towards your spine and come all the way up to standing. And bring your hands to your heart. And do that again. Inhale. Exhale. Hips go back. Spine goes forward. Forward fold. Lift halfway. Fold in. Again, squeeze the block. Push down into the feet. And with strong legs and with stable hips, come up and bring your hands to your heart. Let's do that one more time. Exhale. Lengthen and lift. And fold forward again. Come up to standing. And bring your hands to your heart. And now again, I'm going to take the block out, but I want you to keep that muscle memory of the block being between your inner thighs. So now we're going to work on balancing. And this is where a lot of times we'll kind of fall apart in the hip. We pick up a leg and we collapse into a hip. So hands on the hips, squeeze your imaginary block. And just like we did marching with the bridge, we're going to march standing. It's the same idea. I'm going to lift that knee and make sure my hip's not moving. Lift a knee. So same exact idea. Now you want to challenge your balance a little bit more. Hold. Hold. And this time, as I put my left foot down and I pick my right knee up, I'm going to hold here because I'm going to add on to this. So what you might feel like you're doing here as you're holding is you might feel like you're squeezing your left glute just a little bit or hugging your outer left hip in, okay? Now I'm going to reach and grab onto my right foot, or I'm sorry, my right knee. So what you can do here, if you're really struggling with balance, is just put your hand on a wall. That's totally fine. Or put a couple fingertips on a wall. Hold the knee. And now I'm going to take my knee over to the right. My left hand stays on my hip. And that way I can tell that my left hip is still not moving. So stabilizing, getting a little bit of a stretch through that right inner thigh. And now bring your right knee back to center. And as softly as you can, step back into a lunge. Okay? And I'm going to keep my hands on my hips here. I'm not going to worry about my upper body too much. So I'm going to do a few lunges to strengthen and to stretch. So as I lower both knees, I'm going to bend both knees. I'm going to bend both knees. I'm going to lower my back knee straight down to the ground. Again, my hands are on my hips. My hips are forward. They're not moving around. And now I'm going to come back up and straighten the knees. Inhale, lower the knee. Push into your left heel. You might feel like you're squeezing your left glute a little bit. And now straighten the knees. Inhale, lower. And exhale. Inhale, lower, and hold. And now bring that knee down. And you can flatten out your back foot. Now, like I said, we're doing a combination of strengthening and stretching. So let's take a little bit of a stretch for the front of that right hip flexor. So again, my hips are pointed forward. And I'm not going to just collapse into the stretch. I'm going to squeeze my right glute a little bit. I'm going to send my left knee forward. And it's okay for your knee to go past your toes here because you've got the support of the back knee down. You should feel, now as I move into maybe a little bit more of a back bend, I'm going to feel a deeper stretch through the front of my right hip flexor and my right thigh. Good, and then come back to your lunge and just step forward. On your inhale, lift halfway and fold. Again, you've got that imaginary block between your legs. Come all the way up. Hands to heart. So let's do that on the other side. Hands to hips. Shift your weight into your right foot and slowly pick up your left knee. And hopefully you didn't feel your right hip pop out. Standing strong, standing tall, grab your left knee. Keep breathing. Again, you might feel like you're squeezing your right glute a little bit. Now, keep your hand on your hip and feel that the hips stay steady as you reach your knee over to the left. And it might not go that far out to the left. That's okay, especially if you're tight in your inner thighs. Breathe. And then come back to the middle. And with control, notice how your hips are still pointed forward. That's what we're trying to accomplish here as you step back into your lunge. So left hip back, right hip forward. On your inhale, lower your left knee and then push into your right heel, straighten the legs. Lower and lift. And through this practice, you start to notice, as I'm doing this, I'm going, God, my left hip really wants to open up here. And you just start to notice these things about your own body and where you need to work more on. Where do I need to stretch more? Where do I need to strengthen more to bring my body into better alignment? Lay that foot flat and slowly come forward into your lunge. Maybe take a little more of a back bend here. And then step forward. Halfway lift and fold and come all the way to standing. And bring your hands to your heart. So let's do a little more balancing. Put your hands on your hips, shift your weight into your left foot, pick up your right, and this time we'll come into tree pose. So you're going to place your foot on your ankle or your calf or your inner thigh. So you don't want to place the foot right against the knee because you actually want to push your foot into your leg and your leg back into your foot because guess what? It's like you've got that block there, right? So your foot and your thigh hugging in, hands stay on hips, breathe. You can certainly add the arms here if you want, but the purpose here is to really work on focusing on your hips here. So now I'm going to step back this time into warrior one. So warrior one now, it's a lot like our lunge, but the lunge, the heel is lifted. Now the foot turns out at about a 45-degree angle. I still want my left hip back and my right hip forward. So guess what? In this posture, we are getting a stretch through the front of the right hip as we have the foot connected and the hip moving forward. Now also notice if the pelvis tilts too far forward here. I see a lot of this. So try to bring the hips back into neutral. I'm going to do a little humble warrior here. So hands can go behind you and interlace, or you can keep your hands on your hips. And we're just going to very slowly dive forward. So the hips hinge forward. The legs stay strong and stable. You might come down really low in this posture or not. And you might even put your hands down on the mat. And what I want you to feel is that you're still bringing your left hip back and your right hip forward. And you're energetically, especially if your hands aren't on the ground and you might feel a little wobbly, energetically pull your heels together like you've got that block between your inner thighs. And now from here, just rise up and come into warrior two now. And from warrior two, we're going to go right into goddess pose. So that the heels turn in, the knees and toes turn out, hands on the hips, hold here. So once again, we're energetically pulling the heels in and we're pressing the knees out. Maybe you add the arms, hold here and breathe. And now place your hands on your hips, straighten the knees, turn the toes in, and we'll just get an easy forward fold. So forward folding, I'm really a big stickler about this, is we tend to overstretch the hamstrings. So as you're going down, I want you to go down this slowly and make sure that you are engaging your quad muscles, the fronts of your thighs. Keep your belly pulled up and in. And then from your forward fold, we'll just lift halfway, spin around, and step forward again. Halfway lift, fold, rise to stand, strong legs. Don't forget that block, hands to heart. Okay, so let's do all of that on the other side. Tree pose to start. We're going to stand on the right foot, hands on the hips. Hips stay steady as you bring that foot to the ankle, the calf, or the inner thigh. Push the foot into the leg. Hug the thigh back against the foot. Maybe the arms come up. Breathe. Stand tall. And then here's where I really want you to work on. Keep your hips forward. Try not to open the hips up as you step back into warrior one. So you're going to step perhaps wider than you think so that that left hip and the right hip are evenly pointed straight ahead. So we are getting, as you push through the outer edge of that back foot, we're getting this stretch and opening through the left hip flexor, which many of us need more of that opening through the hip flexors and the strengthening through the back of the hip, right? And then we'll come into our humble warrior. So certainly you can bring your hands behind you or just start working on folding. And so the goal is to move slowly again. Keep the hips strong all the way down. Energetically pull the heels together. Maybe place a hand or two down on the ground. Breathe. And we're still thinking left hip forward, right hip back. And now just push into the feet. Come on up. We'll go right into our goddess pose here. Isometrically pull your heels together. Maybe this time, lift your heels up. steady and strong. Heels come down, hands go to the hips. Slow motion, dive forward. Hinging, hinging, hinging forward. Quads active. I don't want to spend too much time here. So, spin around. Plank position. Bring your forearms down. So when I'm in my plank, check out our class on shoulders and shoulder stability, and we're going to be doing a longer series on shoulders and hips in January. So we're going to bring the knees down, the thighs down, and come into Sphinx. I may have already said that. Or through, right? Pull the chest through. Get a nice stretch here. Maybe bring your head down. And then stretch through the front of my thigh and my hip flexor. So in the knee, grab your foot. This is where you might want to use a strap or a belt or something like that. Place it around your foot, reach back. So you can grab on the inside. I like grabbing from the inside because it helps me to get my shoulder back more. You can certainly grab, I also like placing the hand on the top of the foot. You can grab on the outside, but that tends to bring the shoulder blade forward and off the back. So as I'm stretching the front of my thigh, I want to pull my belly gently towards the spine and try to get that left hip flat on the mat. And let go. Right foot, grab onto it. Try to get that right hip down, right shoulder back. Breathe. And let go of that foot. And now I'm going to push myself up and back into a down dog so that we can now come into pigeon pose. Pigeon can be challenging. It tends to be a posture that everyone really loves because they feel like they have to stretch their hips really deeply in this posture, but it's also really easy to overstretch your hips in pigeon. I think this is where I may have even done myself in. So I want to talk about how to properly set up for pigeon. So I'm going to just pick up my left foot and I'm going to point my knee towards my left arm. And I'm going to keep my knee bent quite a bit here. I'm just going to lay the top of my foot and my ankle and my shin and now my knee down on the mat. So my right knee is pointed up more towards my hand. My foot is pointed back more towards my right foot. And now I'm just going to start to scoot my left leg back and back and back and back. Now, if your hips are really tight, you might want to grab a block or a blanket and place it underneath your left hip because I'm trying to get my hips to be level here. So you might stay here. This might be enough for you. Or you might start walking your hands back a little bit more as well. Breathe here. Now, another option, if you're a little more open, but again, be mindful not to overdo it, is I'm going to lift that back knee up first, and I'm going to take my right foot up closer towards my right hand and flex my foot, and then lay my shin down. And you might just try that without actually laying the hips down just yet. But what I want to make sure I'm doing is that I'm maintaining muscular energy in my left leg. So I'm pushing down through my left foot as I continue to walk my right leg straight back out of my hip. And breathe. You can stay here. You can also take a sleeping pigeon pose, but try not to check out in this posture. Keep the navel pulled in towards the spine. That's going to help keep your core engaged so that you're not just collapsing and stretching too far. You can do this posture on your back as well. And just cross your left ankle over your right thigh and draw your right thigh in towards your belly. And now I'm going to come back up to my hands and just very slowly make my way back into a down dog. You might want to stretch out that left leg a little bit, stretch it back. And now I'll do the same thing on my right. So pick up your right foot, bring your knee, point it towards your right wrist, lay the foot down, top of the foot. So in this positioning of pigeon, my foot is pointed. I'm going to keep walking my left leg back. So I'm not trying to come upright just yet. Just keep walking it back. Maybe place a block under your right hip or a blanket, and then bring yourself up here. Push down through both feet. Both legs are active, and that's going to help support the stretch. Maybe you bring your right foot up more towards your left wrist. Very different sensation. Typically, it'll bring more sensation into the stretch. Maybe walk your hands forward. So you can stay here. I just want to show you the other option. If you didn't quite get that, would be to lay on your back and cross the ankle over the thigh, just like this. But my leg is still active. I'm not relaxing the legs. Okay. So from pigeon, we are going to make our way onto our backs. So you can just walk your hands back towards your hips and then swing your leg around and roll down onto your backside. And on your back, we're going to extend the left leg straight. Let's extend both legs and stretch. Hug your right knee into your chest. And take your right leg up to the sky. Rotate the foot a little bit here. I'm going to get a half happy baby pose. So I'm going to bend the knee and grab the foot. Keep your left hip down. Back of the neck long. And then bring your leg back up. And what I really want to work on here is getting an IT band stretch or a stretch to the outside. Place your right hand on your hip. Reach over with your left hand and turn your thigh bone in slightly. So the toes start to point a little more towards the left. And they'll start to pull your leg across your body, but don't let your right hip come up off the ground. So I'm pushing down with my right hand as I reach across. It looks like this. Breathe. And then take your foot and tuck it behind your left thigh and take that leg all the way over into a spinal twist. And then roll back over. Make sure your hips are flat. Hug your left knee in. Take the leg up to the sky. Rotate the foot. And take your half happy baby pose. Right hip down, chin tucked. I'm trying to gently pull my knee towards the ground. And now IT band, straighten the leg. Reach over with your right hand, place your left hand on your hip. Lock it down, and then start pulling your leg across the body. And you should feel that stretch through the outer hip, outer thigh. And then we'll take that final spinal twist, bring the and release your twist. We'll finish with feet together, knees open. You can place your hips up on a block here. You can also push down through your feet and lift your hips up. And this posture is actually a release for your psoas, which is deep, 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 deep inside of your pelvis and tends to get really tight on most of us. And then just lay the hips down. Stay here for a few more breaths. If you've got a little bit of extra time, you can move into Shavasana. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope your hips feel better, and I hope to see you soon. Namaste.